The next item on the agenda is an information item to provide us with an update by New Brunswick, NB Power, I guess the way I like to call him, on 2015 INTREPID exercise held at the Point Lepreau nuclear generating station as outlined in CMD 16M31. I understand that Mr. Hickman will make the presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commission members. For the record, my name is Charles Hickman. I'm the Director of Environment and Emergency Planning for New Brunswick Power corporately. The presentation today would be just an overview of what we did during our INTREPID exercise last year. It was held in November, and it was a two-day exercise which involved a simulated event at the Point Lepreau nuclear generating station. It was designed to challenge over 30 organizations, and it involved over 1,500 people, both within Canada, locally, federally, and in the United States. And by far was the largest emergency exercise that has been conducted in the province of New Brunswick. We'll start with a short video which was prepared using material during the exercise and prior to the exercise. This video is going to be posted on our website following this commission meeting for information for the public so they can see this as well. After the video is played, I'll continue with a few more slides just to give some highlights to other aspects of the exercise.
Emergencies can happen anywhere and at any time. They vary in type, in size, and most importantly, they vary in the overall impact they can have on people and the environment. Now, more than ever, Canadians are aware of the importance of being prepared and planning ahead for these events whenever possible. For some emergencies, like floods and forest fires that are more predictable, government organizations have plans in place to better prepare for and respond to these events. These plans reassure Canadians that their government is prepared to deal with the more common emergencies that could threaten public safety. What about emergencies that are less common? How do we prepare for unpredictable or even highly improbable events like a nuclear emergency? Even though the likelihood of a nuclear emergency occurring in Canada is extremely remote, planning and preparation for just such an emergency is conducted in much the same manner as for a flood or forest fire. In those provinces with nuclear power plants, each level of government has its own well-developed and detailed plans, and the capability to protect the residents during a nuclear emergency. For the utilities operating the nuclear power plant, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission requires these emergency plans as part of the plant's license to operate. New Brunswick Power has always maintained the safety of the Point Lepreau generating station by ensuring the latest safety systems and equipment are in place and by updating emergency response plans and procedures on a regular basis. In order to clearly demonstrate a response capability, plans need to be rigorously tested, especially when an emergency engages many organizations. At NB Power, regular drills and exercises are conducted with the province to test key elements of their plans. These drills are designed to examine select areas of response that are unique to a nuclear emergency, like the activation of monitoring and decontamination centers and evacuation of the public in affected areas. However, in order to fully test the robustness of these plans and measure New Brunswick's ability to respond to a nuclear emergency, something more complex and integrated was needed. A large, full-scale, realistic exercise was the best way to thoroughly test and challenge the strength of response plans in their entirety. One that would engage organizations at every level, from the operator through each level of government. Exercise INTREPID 2015 was a two-day NB Power-sponsored exercise held in November 2015 and involved a simulated incident at the Point Lepreau generating station. The goals of this exercise were to test and demonstrate the ability of all participating organizations to work together effectively in responding to a nuclear emergency in order to identify areas where their plans and procedures could be improved.
The last layer of defense is emergency preparedness. So our interest is to see that the operator, New Brunswick Power, can interface with all of their partners, the stakeholders, to ensure that there can be a seamless and very effective response to protect the public during a nuclear emergency.
In total, 30 organizations and over 1,500 people from every level of government participated in the exercise. Developing a realistic exercise of this size and scope was a complex and detailed process that took more than 12 months of hard work and dedicated planning. To achieve this, an exercise design team was assembled, which included representatives from the key organizations with a role in nuclear emergency response. An outside group was brought in to manage and coordinate the exercise, as well as to set up a virtual site for much of the simulation. To ensure a common understanding of goals and objectives, this design team participated in monthly meetings, major planning conferences, specialized workshops, and preparatory exercises throughout each stage of exercise development. The exercise design team was responsible for creating an environment that was as realistic as possible, and one that would engage all of the organizations that would be involved in a response to a nuclear emergency.
There's many organizations involved in such an exercise. It's not simply the province. We're supported by federal departments. We're supported at the local level by first responders. Municipalities have a stake in this as well. So our function is really coordination of all the diverse elements that come to play in effecting an orderly and effective response.
One of the challenges organizations often face is a limited exercise window to carry out the response functions. To overcome this artificiality, Exercise INTREPID 2015 was conducted over 2 extended days, which made it possible for many participants to test specific elements of the response to a nuclear emergency. The scenario began on day 1, with a situation at the Point Lepreau generating station that was complicated by a loss of power and a severe weather event. Notifications to external agencies were made in accordance with the station's on-site response procedures. For the duration of the first day, the problem was contained at the plant, which allowed NB Power to fully test their on-site plans. This included the opportunity to deploy and operate their emergency mitigation equipment. Medical personnel were also tested at the plant in their handling and treatment of a contaminated casualty that required transport to St. John Regional Hospital. Meanwhile, regional, provincial, and federal organizations took precautionary measures to keep the public safe in the event that the situation worsened. The province was able to test their emergency notification system and alerted residents living within 20 kilometers of the plant of the developing situation. As part of the protective actions, the province, with the support of NB Power, also set up a monitoring and decontamination center in the event that an evacuation were to be ordered. Many organizations were also on standby to coordinate and set up reception centers and animal shelters that would receive evacuees and their pets. At the end of the first day, NB Power was dealing with an emergency on site, and the province was ready and positioned to quickly respond if the situation deteriorated. On day 2 of the exercise, organizations arrived at their emergency operations centers to learn that the situation at the plant did in fact worsen through the night. The province and the CNSC were informed that there would be a release of radioactive material to the environment within 12 hours.
The local residents within the 20-kilometer zone will be evacuated, as well as the local school. You will not be allowed into the area. We have traffic control points that are set up coming out west out of St. John, east out of St. Stephen. Highway 1 is shut down at Penfield and Prince of Wales, so people will not be getting any further east or west from those points.
After analyzing the simulated events and assessing the possible impact on the public, the New Brunswick Minister of Public Safety declared a state of emergency, and an evacuation of all residents living within 20 kilometers of the station was ordered. Residents were notified of the order and followed the instructions that were provided by the wardens. More than 100 residents living in the affected area volunteered to participate in the exercise as an evacuee. 2 reception centers were set up. Emergency social services were offered to arriving evacuees, allowing the Canadian Red Cross to fully test the operations of each reception center, including the provision of food, lodging, and medical assistance. At the same time, the disaster animal response team mobilized their personnel and equipment to accommodate displaced pets arriving with their evacuated owners at the reception center. As would be expected during a real nuclear emergency, area hospitals would likely receive a high volume of worried well concerned about their health and radiological contamination. During Exercise Intrepid, the St. John Regional Hospital was well equipped to manage the influx of people by setting up their decontamination tent in the ambulance bay. This allowed medical staff to quickly screen people for contamination and provide reassurance to members of the public that there were no health risks present. Meanwhile, the federal government was enacting the response plans and ensuring technical support was provided to the province in a coordinated and timely manner. Throughout the entire exercise, the Federal Nuclear Emergency Plan Technical Assessment Group was providing valuable data to the Provincial Emergency Operations Center for the purpose of decision-making to protect the safety of the public. By the end of Day 2, organizations were tasked with managing the response to an ongoing release that continued right to the end of the exercise. Exercise Intrepid 2015 also tested communications with the public. A simulated media website was used to provide news articles, radio news stories, and 2 daily news video broadcasts about the event. This website made the exercise more realistic for the players by providing a news environment that simulated real-world news coverage. Since many Canadians look to social media as sources of credible information, sharing public messaging through simulated social media was also tested during the exercise. A very robust simulation cell was established at the Exercise Control Cell in Ottawa, which was responsible for ensuring that public affairs personnel were challenged with questions and concerns presented from the media and general public. The exercise website also provided a secure area where press releases and emergency bulletins could be posted and shared with other organizations with a role in public messaging, allowing them an additional mechanism to ensure their public messages were coordinated. Both NB Power and the province were proactive in the management of public awareness and conducted several press conferences throughout the exercise to provide valuable and current information to the members of the media and public. Exercise Intrepid 2015 created a unique platform that gave participating organizations the opportunity to fully test their plans, work with other organizations that would be involved in a collective response effort, and practice communications in a realistic and interactive environment.
Intrepid is unique. It gives an opportunity for all the different players to come together, to really say, how do the interfaces work? We assume certain things from each of our partners. Let's really test those, see if those interfaces are working, see if the information is flowing smoothly.
So, how did we do? Is Canada, and in particular, the province of New Brunswick, prepared to respond to a nuclear emergency at the Point Lepreau generating station? Throughout Exercise Intrepid, emergency operations centers at the regional, provincial, and federal levels were challenged at a level not normally experienced through regular drills and exercises. Overall, participating organizations met all of their response objectives and were able to identify some areas that can be improved upon, all in an effort to optimize capability and ensure the continued preparedness of New Brunswick for this extremely unlikely event. Exercise Intrepid 2015 clearly demonstrated the ability of NB Power, the province of New Brunswick, and the various levels of government to coordinate the response to a nuclear emergency in an efficient and effective manner. New Brunswick is prepared. Now it's up to you, as a Canadian, to make sure that you are prepared too. If you live near a nuclear power plant, stay informed, have a plan, and know what to do in the unlikely event that an emergency could happen where you live. If you reside near the Point Lepreau generating station, read the information packages that are sent to your home, or visit these websites for more information.
I'm assuming you don't want to listen to that a second time, so we'll move on. So I'm just going to cover a couple of items here in addition to the video. As I mentioned, the video will be posted on our public website for anybody to look at as we go forward. So we'll talk a little bit about the preparation, the actual exercise itself, and just finish up with some discussion around some of the best practices and the opportunities and what we will do with that information. I really would like to emphasize that the preparation for an exercise such as Intrepid or Huron or Unified Response is as valuable, if not more valuable, than the actual exercise itself. It allows you to validate in a non-exercise environment and to develop relationships that you would not otherwise have an opportunity to develop during an exercise. And this is from the very top of the house right down to the working level. In preparing for Intrepid, we had working groups between the CNSC, provincial departments, other federal departments to understand sharing of data, to understand the scenario, to understand the command and control aspects. We had a joint oversight committee that involved our deputy ministers in the province. So we had a very high level of interface and interaction getting ready for the exercise. It also allows you to do pre-drills and tabletop exercises. For example, we exercised some of the monitoring and decontamination equipment to its full extent in a rehearsal drill. During the actual Intrepid exercise, we deployed it, but we didn't actually use the facilities themselves. In the rehearsal, in the preparation, we actually set up the entire facility and ran that facility. The overall objective, as mentioned in the video, is to validate preparedness to respond to an event. And it's not just NB Power, it's not just the province, it's not just the CNSC. We had over 30 organizations who are players and would be players in a significant event of this nature. And this allows us to test all the interfaces between all the players. And this includes both people we work with on a regular basis. So for example, we recently received a good practice from WANO for our interfaces with our local provincial fire department. They were involved in the design and the exercise, but we also had the opportunity to work with our state of Maine partners, both FEMA and the local state of Maine, because we incorporated an international aspect to this exercise, again, that you don't normally see. The design process allows us to identify a series of objectives that every organization might have, and to design the actual exercise so that you can meet those objectives. To meet those objectives, we set it up as a 2-day exercise. Day 1 focused on the on-site activities and with a real intention to exercise the improvements in the equipment that we had put in place since Fukushima. So we had new equipment, new procedures, new people, new processes. We wanted to exercise all of those. Day 2 was focused entirely on the off-site, driven by on-site decisions, but it included the actual evacuation of a certain portion of the community within the 20-kilometer zone. And again, that's an activity that is often role-played but not usually conducted. We actually evacuated almost 190 people, schools, and residents from the area as part of this exercise. We also provided the opportunity for external experts to attend, to observe. This was both from within Canada. We had international people who attended to both learn and give us some feedback on the exercise as well. Last couple of slides here just to focus on some of the best practices and the opportunities. We heard earlier today, and it's in all these exercises, technology is continually changing, improving, evolving. We used technology during the exercise, both as part of existing plans and procedures, but we also test drove some other technologies, some other tools. But one of the best practices was basically the sharing of information and the use of technology. And we have approximately 4, almost 5 levels of communication between New Brunswick Power, the province, federal partners, and all different players. So we have just phones, we have computers, we have cell phones, we have satellite phones, we have a ham radio system. They were all exercised as part of this exercise. That received a number of good comments from the evaluation team. The coordination and alignment related to social media. A huge part of this exercise was the social media and public communication component. As indicated during the video, we set up a completely secure website that allowed us to have the equivalent to Facebook, Twitter, internet, basically the media. We had in excess of 600 injects during the exercise, where basically somebody from the exercise team would send an email or put a tweet up that says there's an issue at Point Lepreau and here's what I think. It involved, as an exercise, all of the communications folks from the entire province. I know the CNSC communications staff were involved, Health Canada's communications staff were involved, public safeties were, all involved just in the social media aspect of this exercise. A huge exercise, really proved that we could handle it, that it was well set up. We identified some opportunities, but again, it was really a great part of the exercise that received a lot of positive feedback. We're very fortunate at Point Lepreau. We're a small community. We have a dedicated group of wardens who are basically trained and employed by the province to help manage our interface with the community. They have a role during day-to-day activities. They know the community. They interface with the people in the community. They do the demographic surveys. They distribute the KI pills. They are a huge, valuable resource that provide a very local, very tangible asset on the ground to help manage an event of this nature. And we have them as a key player during this exercise. But like I say, they exist, they're there 24/7. We're very lucky in that respect. That's not the sort of resource that you can put in place for every facility, but it certainly works well for us. One of the next highlights was the fact that during this 2 days, we had a lot of first responders, a lot of off-site people coming to site to respond, whether it be ambulance, whether it be fire, whether it be the RCMP or whoever else. There was kudos given for the process by which we essentially would stop those folks at the checkpoints and brief them before they went into basically the emergency zone. So we have an off-site center, we have a series of roadblocks set up, and after the declaration of an emergency and the site is essentially locked down, nobody goes to site without getting that initial briefing. It was seen as being very successful. It went very well indeed. Essentially, no first responders were allowed on site without that briefing. And that involves a lot of interfaces between the site, so the site needs to know what's going on, who's trying to get onto site. Security is involved. The RCMP are the people manning the roadblocks. It involves radiation protection, many different moving parts. But it went very well. And the last best practice here is all around communications within and between the response organizations. As I said, we had over 30 organizations playing, and playing actively, not just sitting on the sides watching. So we were sharing information back and forth in real time, essentially between all 30 organizations. We use some software that helps some of the initial notifications. The province uses some software. It's actually federally supported software that allows us interfaces into Maine, into the other provinces. And it all worked extremely well. Health Canada has software they use for sharing plume modeling and so on, EMAP. It worked very well as well. We also test drove the use of WebEOC, which is a piece of software that we had on site but is not yet part of our plans, to see if it was going to indeed help even on top of what we were doing. Overall, it was extremely successful. The software, the technology worked very well indeed. It also worked very well with the public. And with the public, there was an opportunity here as well. As I say, the social media aspect was a huge success. We ran a whole series of mock interviews and press releases. The video showed both our president, 2 ministers at different times, deputy ministers participating in those interviews, in those press events. So very good involvement at a senior level to do that public communication. But we also identified that there's a need to ensure that when you've got that many people involved, particularly in social media, understanding nuclear terminology is a challenge. So getting nuclear terminology correct and that training around that is important. So some opportunities, just high-level opportunities, and these are at the top of the house, if you like, where we have the interfaces and between the departments. The station, for years, has used IAEA methodology to define the evacuation zones. So there's a very strong technical basis to our emergency plans. That works extremely well. The province is familiar with how we've done that and how they're defined. But the province uses essentially a much more tactical view of life in terms of, okay, where are my roads, where do people live, where do I need to get people to move to? So the provincial tactical process is based on a different set of zones, and the two sets of zones don't match exactly. On the ground tactical tends to overshadow the technical basis. It's conservative, it's always safer, it's on the safer side of the decision making. We identified there's an opportunity here to align some of the terminology between ourselves and the province so that in a bad day, there's no misunderstanding about terminology and which zones we're talking about. So it was identified as an opportunity, and we're already working on this. We exercised the reception centers, and full marks to the Red Cross organization. They set up, fully staffed, a full reception center at the University of New Brunswick. And we provided the radiation protection staff at that facility. In doing so, this is not something we've ever exercised before. We did no trial runs, so we identified some opportunities. We identified that understanding exactly what the role of the MB Power radiation protection staff was relative to the Red Cross staff needed to be sorted out, explained, and clarified. The underlying issue is, or point is, that if you're going to a reception center, you've already been deemed to be non-contaminated. You are clean. If you weren't clean, you wouldn't be going to the reception center. So the requirement for additional monitoring was unclear during the exercise. We've clarified it since. We continue to work with Red Cross. But this was an excellent part of the exercise, an area that we had never exercised before. Again, in terms of roles and responsibilities, we have a technical advisory group that works very closely with the Provincial Emergency Measures Organization. It includes the Chief Medical Officer of Health and a number of other technical staff. Your staff are involved and accessible, health staff as well. However, there was some discussion during the exercise as to exactly what the authority of that group is, particularly if you've got people sitting in or changing out from one day to the next. Understanding what the role of that group is important. So we've defined some terms of reference and clarified the roles and responsibilities. That's work that's already been completed. So going forward, we've always had and continue to have an extremely good working relationship with the Provincial Emergency Measures Organization, and they represent the entire province. So the Department of Health sits on that committee, Environment does, and we will continue to work with that, those committees, that relationship, to work through all the high-level joint findings and opportunities for improvement. So that committee has already met. We basically triaged the findings out of the exercise and are working those down. And that'll be a long-term activity. And as we address certain items, they'll get addressed through tabletop exercises and eventually in another full-scale exercise. Each organization, CNSC included, will develop their own set of internal focused opportunities to improve. Every organization did their own internal evaluation. We've done the same. All the MB Power activities have been entered into our corrective action program. They'll be triaged. We'll work those down again as we get ready for future exercises and drills and training. And we'll look for other opportunities to exercise parts of the plan, and the plan being the province-wide plan that we haven't really exercised in the past. So things like recovery was mentioned earlier today. Recovery might be part of a future exercise. We have an ingestion pathway. So if there's contamination released from the station, what does that do to people who've got berries, they've got farm animals, they've got grains, whatever it might be. So how do we control the ingestion food path going forward? These are areas that we're looking forward to exercising in the future, either as a tabletop or as a larger exercise. And we welcome Health Canada's activities in protective actions. They will help us as we define and incorporate those recommendations at a provincial level. So in summary, Intrepid was huge. The planning for Intrepid was massive and gave us huge benefit, and full thanks to CNSC staff who participated very fully in that whole exercise. Also kudos to Health Canada, who played a very significant role in this exercise. The province played a huge number of provincial departments, individuals on the ground, the RCMP, local fire departments, everybody was involved. As is intended, it identified some opportunities, it identified some strengths, and we're happy to take both of those. We'll work on the opportunities and we'll continue to build on the strengths, continue to improve. And from our point of view, we believe we demonstrated that with the province, with our partners, we have a multifaceted and very robust emergency plan in place, and are very happy to talk to anybody about that. The experts who attended from elsewhere, I think, were equally impressed and provided some useful feedback. But I think we jointly, CNSC as well, can stand proud as to what happened during the Intrepid exercise. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you.